Good afternoon. My topic is over alcohol, drugs, and gambling. And this is 52 slides at 2 minutes per slide, they say. I'll be done in a little over an hour and a half. So, let's get right into it. The introduction, I'm going to start with 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 12. Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you, but ye are washed, but you are sanctified, but you are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus, and by the Spirit of our God. In Galatians 5, 19 through 21, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revellings, and such like. Of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in the past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. So my topic is, if you saw in red, witchcraft is drugs, drunkenness is drunkenness, alcohol, and the previous slide, covetousness, which will encapsulate gambling. Now Romans 12, 1 and 2, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And James 1, 14 and 15, but every man is tempted, when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. So I'm going to start off into alcohol. And when we go into each of these, I'm going to go to alcohol, drugs, and gambling. And each of them will own within themselves, will have their own conclusion. So when you see the first conclusion, I'm not done. So I've got to specify alcohol conclusion, then there'll be when you see the fourth conclusion, then I'm done. So these are the things I'm going to talk about in alcohol. Modern alcohol versus Bible time alcohol. Water was bad. That's what we always hear, is why they had to use wine or one of those different things. So this is one of the arguments. Water was bad. So I'm going to have an argument and counter argument for that. Hebrew and Greek words. Go to verses against alcohol. Drunkenness, drunk, drunkard, and sober. How does alcohol affect the brain? Now I have that specifically after sober. So I want to have put those together. I thought about putting it earlier, but I thought it would fit better here, although it would kind of make more sense to be at the beginning, but this word's going to be. And the go-to verses that people often use for social drinking. And then I'm going to go through 3 examples. The Last Supper, or the last Passover that Christ was a part of, the wedding feast, and the example of Timothy. Alcohol, modern versus Bible times. So in other words, what I want to get to in this is what we call alcohol today. The alcohol content, even in wine, modern wines, is not equivalent to what they had back then. So in Bible times, you could ferment it more on all by itself. It could ferment, and it'd probably be somewhere between 3 to 7% based on the amount of sugar in the grape itself. You could get up to 10%, possibly get up to 10%, if the sugar content was that high. But usually they had to add yeast to it. And they were able to add yeast back in those times. And they got up to probably around 10%. And then strong drink, about the same. And we're going to learn a little bit more about strong drink and wine differences. But the strong drink is often when we think about strong drink, we think about liquors. Strong liquors and maybe like whiskey or something like that. They did not have that. They did not have that process to be able to, the distillation process back in the first century, and sure not back before then. It did come about a few hundred years later, but not at this time. It was not available. So even with the strong drink, which is probably not a real good word to use there, it could have incorporated the use of other fruits other than grapes, and then or barley, and they did have beer, but it was at a significantly lower concentration that was available in our modern times. And so modern fermented wine, which encapsulates distillation, it takes raw alcohol and then adds it to wine to be able to get a much higher concentration of alcohol, up to 22%. And then the strong drink, which is what we most think of, these strong liquors, they can get up to 95% alcohol concentration, which was not even close to being possible during the first century and before, during our Bible times. So one of the arguments that we always hear about, water was bad in Bible times, but not all water was bad. There are several examples of good water. There are well water. We have examples of Christ being at a well. Remember, he met the woman at the well where he promised her that he could promise her where she would thirst no more. But at the same time, people went to the well and they were able to drink water. They were able to transport water from these wells, but at the same time, there could be possibly contaminated water wells. I understand that. Contaminated freshwater sources, it was very prevalent in those times. They're prevalent in our times, but they did not have the processes that we do to have to process. But there was good fresh water sources available, at least in places. And then rainwater could be gathered, and water could be filtered and boiled out. The same process that we go through in our homes. Say if the water line busts and it comes through, and they'll advise you, boil the water. They could do the same thing in those times. They could boil the water. And then water could be stored. We're going to talk about storage for wines and things like that. Water could also be stored and kept clean. Now, we're going to talk about the other processes. The juices back then and non-alcoholic wine back then could be either filtered, they could be boiled, they could be reduced, and they could be diluted. All those things, at a minimum, could completely remove the alcohol, and a dilution process put it at such a low level that it's almost not enough alcohol to affect the body. But they could actually dilute it down, then add water to it, or reduce it down and add water. So there's a few words that I want to go into is the alcohol, Hebrew and Aramaic words. The first one is yayin, which shows up in the Old Testament 141 times. And it's a lot of people will look at this as they call it an intoxicating wine, an intoxicating liquid. But it was also a not intoxicating liquid. And it also could be just the grape. It could also just be the vine. And this word is used in Nehemiah 5:18 when there are all sorts of wines that were brought up. So there are all different types of yayin, I may be pronouncing it wrong, forgive me, that were available during the first century. Sheker, which is always translated into, in the Old Testament, there's translated 21 times, it's translated as strong drink, and one time it's translated as strong wine. But this, most oftentimes, was in reference to an intoxicating liquid. But it's also used in that time period, and I'm going to try to prove in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, that was also used as something other than non-intoxicating. But what it comes from, this word represents something, a juice or a wine or intoxicating drink that was made from something other than a grape, some other sweet fruit. This could be a sweet syrup, this could be some sweet liquid, and it was just made from other fruits other than a grape. And Tyrosh, which appears 41 times, and it is freshly squeezed juice, is what it is. But it was also used as, in its original form, it was freshly squeezed juice. But it became, and it kind of rolled over into to where it could be a young wine or a not full of age wine, intoxicating wine, didn't go through the entire fermented process. So it in itself is a little bit generic. It's generic as well. It turned into being generic. Acis, which is pressed on, it's minimal use, pressed on or trodden out, which is juice or wine or fresh off the wine press, freshly squeezed. Mimsek, which is mixed wine, which is usually they added some spices to a wine, and this is most always an intoxicating drink. And then there's the Aramaic word, chamar or chimar, which is a foaming juice or wine. So it's still in its kind of generic. And then your Greek words in the New Testament, we find oinos, juice, wine, could even be vinegar, and about anything in between. This is the most generic word of every word. Tyros, yayin, and some of the other words, all of these, when you go back into like the Septuagint, when you put it into Greek, it is oinos. So oinos is very generic, and this is the word most commonly used in the New Testament. And then sakara, which is only used once, is like the Hebrew sheker, other fruits. And oxos is a vinegar, sour, unripe grapes, or wine, a sour wine. And then glucose, which is used one time in the New Testament, but generally it's new wine, it's translated as new wine, and it's usually just juice. But if you go back into Acts chapter 2, they accuse them of being drunk with this, glucose. And that's when Peter says, this is only the third hour day, these men are not drunk. That's when they were all speaking in, remember Acts chapter 2, that's when they all received the gift of tongues. They all started preaching in a different language, which was not common to them, but it was common to the people. They were speaking in tongues. And then this word, I'm going to butcher it really bad, worse than the others. Genomatos tes ampelo, which is, when we see at the Lord's Supper, the fruit of the vine. Fruit is the first word of the, and then vine is the last word in Greek. So, generally speaking, this fruit of the vine is in the New Testament. We're going to prove that in its spot in New Testament and how it's used properly, it is a non-alcoholic drink, and generally, historically speaking, it's a non-alcoholic drink. Now, alcohol, and a lot of times when you hear the argument about when we shouldn't drink wine, and it's often, so a lot of people will quote passages that are dealing directly with a Nazirite, which is not the best place to go, because not only could the Nazirite not drink wine containing alcohol, he can also not eat grapes. So there's a special thing associated with the Nazirite, which is we find in Numbers 6, 3, 14, Judges 3, 4, 7, and 14, and then Luke 1:15. At the same time, the mother was not allowed, while pregnant with the child, was not allowed to have anything from the vine either, not even a grape. So these aren't the best illustrations to show that someone other than a Nazirite shouldn't use it, but these are commonly used. But we're going to get over to biblical examples forbidding alcohol. Proverbs 23, 29 through 34. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? Who are these people? What do they do? Who are they? They that tarry long at the wine. This is your yayin. They that go to seek mixed wines. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red. So don't even look at it from the beginning. When it giveth his color in the cup, when it moves itself aright. At the last, it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. This illustration of yayin is intoxicating, and what this is saying is don't even start with it. Don't drink it, don't be around with it, don't look at it, don't be a part of it, because what's it going to do? It's going to biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. And then this goes into why. This is the reason why we don't even want to start the process. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thy heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of the mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? And then I will seek it yet again. After all these terrible things happen to you, people who like to drink and get drunk, they're going to come back and they're going to redo the process over again. And we see this in the world. We've seen it before. We know that this happens. And Proverbs 20 verse 1, wine, the yayin, is a mocker. Strong drink, sheker, is raging, and whoever is deceived thereby is not wine. Proverbs 31, 4 and 5. It is not for kings, Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink. Lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. So, Lemuel's mother, and we don't know a lot about Lemuel. We don't know who he was. There's no record of him other than this. And some will even argue that Lemuel is possibly even himself, is himself, but we don't know that for sure. It could be someone else. But his mother is telling him these things. Stay away from alcohol. It's not for you. It's not for you. You won't have good judgment. Stay away from it. And then Ephesians 5:18, which is often the passage that's also often used for social drinking in itself, or allowance of some intoxicating drinks. And be not drunk with wine, which is the oinos, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. So what is interesting about this is other Greek words that have to be studied. And be not drunk is really not the correct way that this should be translated. A better way to translate this is don't even start the process of drinking because you may get drunk. Don't even start it. Don't start that process. That would be a better way to read this verse, is don't start the process. Because most people will read this and say, well, I can drink and not get drunk. But the actual reading is don't even start the process. Don't drink a little bit. Don't even start it. Don't drink it. Don't drink alcohol. And then Isaiah 5, 11 and 12. Woe unto them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, till wine inflame them. And the harp and the viol and the tabret and pipe and wine are in their feasts, but they regard not the works of the Lord, neither consider the operation of his hands. So one of the things that have problem with drinking alcoholic beverages is you forget God. You forget his commandments. You forget his teaching. You don't worship him. You don't praise him. You don't do what we are not doing and keeping his will. And so some examples in the Bible of drunkenness. And so in Psalm 107, 27, and Job 12, 21, and Jeremiah 23, verse 9, some of the things that we see in life when we see people in drunkenness, they lose their motor skills. Stumbling, shaking, loss of consciousness. Proverbs 31, 35, Lot's daughter, and then we also have the example of Lot. Lot's daughters got him drunk, and they lay with him. And then also in Proverbs 31, verse 35, we have the addiction. And then verse 35 we read a while ago is when, although they had all these things happen to them, they went back and they'll come back and they'll do it again. Sickness or vomiting. One of the things that we can see when people are intoxicated, Isaiah 19, verse 14, and then poor judgment. So one example of this is Noah became naked in Genesis 9:20 through 21 after he planted a vineyard and he drank and he got drunk and he undressed himself. And as his sons found him, one of his sons essentially made fun of him, and the other two turned their backs to him and covered him up with a blanket. But one of the things that we show is that he did lose some of the mental capacity to know what is right and what is wrong himself. Noah himself went into and followed a drunkenness. And then in the same regards, we can look at Habakkuk 2:15. And I don't have it in here, so I'm going to go ahead and look it up and read it to you. But Habakkuk 2:15. Woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that putteth thy bottle to him, and maketh him drunken also, that thou mayest look on their nakedness. So in this situation, the neighbor is getting his neighbor drunk and a lot of times there's a purpose for that. And a lot of times we hear about that in such as college parties. Men will try to convince women to drink in order that they can later convince women to remove their clothes. So we are not supposed to give anyone drink, especially for this manner to look on their nakedness. And then the other issues that we have associated with drinking is just the physical of drunkenness, of a drunkard, of someone who drinks too much. Some of the body issues are liver disease, some issues associated with that. A lot of issues can happen from excessive drinking in regards. And the other things that we see is emotional problems. People who get drunk, a lot of people can they can rage, they can get very angry, they can be very sensitive and emotional, they can be a whole completely different person in regard when they get drunk. So continue on. So what does God want of us? And in this work, we find that God wants us to be sober. And there's a Greek word that I'm not going to discuss that is for sober, which is to have a clear mind, clear thinking. But if we're drinking alcoholic drinks, we can't be clear thinkers. But this word, nepho, which is translated into sober, this one is be free from the influence of intoxicants. Be completely free of it. So without any regard, there are verses, and I'm going to go through these verses that specifically talk about this sober in regards to when we think sober, it's more than just a clear mind. This is specific to a clear mind, and this is in regards to drinking alcohol. 1 Thessalonians 5 through 8. Ye are all children of light, and the children of day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation. Christians, followers of God, we are of the day. We are the light. We need to be sober because the people of the night, the people of darkness, are the ones who participate in drinking. 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. And then 2 Timothy 4:5. But watch, or be sober in all things. Endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry. And then 1 Peter 1:13 through 15 through 16. Wherefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lust in your ignorance, but as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation, because it is written, Be ye holy, for I am holy. What are one of the ways we're supposed to be holy? We must be sober to be holy. We are required to be holy by God. And one of the things that we must do is we must be sober. So keep in your mind sober and drunkenness and the scriptures that we've read so far. When we talk about how does alcohol affect the brain? Alcohol affects the memory and reasoning judgment part of the brain before it affects the part of the brain that controls your motor skills. A lot of times when we see the effects of alcohol, it goes back to someone stumbling around, slurred speech, all those kind of things. But it affects the part of the brain that controls your memory and your reasoning and your judgment. So keep in mind, so if we're to be sober, alcohol, the first thing it's going to affect is what we need to concentrate. One thing that we need to keep our mind clear. If we're drinking alcohol, we are not keeping our minds clear. Let me continue on, and we're going to talk about this Harvard article. This is your brain on alcohol. So, one drink is 1.5 ounces of 80 proof spirits. I'm not sure exactly what an 80 proof spirit is, but 1.5 of those shot glasses. So imagine what you get in a shot glass. Keep that in mind. 5 ounces of wine. So that's one of those wine glasses. If you go to a restaurant, you put a wine glass in your cup. When they fill those up, that's going to be about 5 ounces. Or 12 ounces of beer. So a can of beer. Each of those has about the same alcohol content. 1.5 ounces or a shot glass, a wine glass, and a beer can all have about the same alcohol content, and that's considered one drink. And so in this article, a moderate drinker is 1 drink per day for women and 2 for men. So this is your social drinking type thing. And so what they have done is they've ran these PET scans to look at the brain, and it says happier, less stressed, more sociable. That's the effect that you get from drinking alcohol. The PET scans show alcohol releases endorphins. These are the pleasure hormones. This is why people like to get these feel good. So when it comes up and it affects your brains, that's what it's releasing, these endorphins, to make you feel good. So here's kind of one of the risks. The other thing that they've studied on a 30-year study. British study found MRI scans showed the risk of hippocampal, which is the memory and reasoning part of the brain that we've already been talking about, shrinkage 6 times riskier for heavy drinker. And then this article says 4 to 6 drinks a day, and 3 times riskier for moderate drinkers than non-drinkers, non-alcohol drinkers. After 30 years, this is after a 30-year study. So the people who had 1, or for women, or 2 drinks a day, the moderate or the social drinker, their brain would shrink more than one who doesn't drink. And then a heavy drinker significantly. And in this study, as it continued, this was the British study, and then there's a Harvard MRI study, found that the amount of hippocampus shrinkage was directly related to the volume consumed. There's 2 different studies. There's a British study and there's a Harvard study showing that the amount of alcohol that you drink can be almost directly related to the amount of shrinkage in the memory and reasoning part of your brain. So social drinking. A lot of people use certain verses, and they use more than just the verses I'm going to use for certain verse for this argument. And I've actually always struggled with Deuteronomy 14:26 until the Hebrew study that we were talking about earlier, the yayin and the sheker, especially the sheker part. And I've heard people explain sheker as just strong wine. Strong wine, and then the yayin or the wine was actually diluted down. But that's not correct. That's not correct. What we showed before is that yayin could be that one range. It could be just juice, or it could be full-on intoxicating wine, up to 10%. Sheker could also be just juice or a syrup, up to about 10% alcohol, but it's made from some other fruit other than grapes. So when we read Deuteronomy 14:26, keep that in mind. And this is what a lot of people miss. Because every time, and this is what I always study, and this is what I always got hung up on, it says strong drink. Strong drink is hotter than wine. That's the high alcohol content stuff. That's how I always read it. Always. Until doing this study, and I always hung up on it. I was always hung up on it. And here's why, and so here we go. And thou shalt bestow that money. So what's going on in Deuteronomy 14 is they're teaching them how to tithe. This is what you're supposed to do with tithe. And so in regards to 14:26, if you're coming from a long journey where it's too far to take your oxen or to take whatever you had planned to tithe, you sell them at home or sell them somewhere along the way, you would take that money. So this money that we're talking about here, that money is what they sold. So they're bringing their tithe, but rather than bringing an animal or their crop, or part of their crop, they're bringing money for what they had sold it for back home to make the journey easier. And they were allowed to do this in Deuteronomy 14. So in verse 26, this money, that's where this money comes from and what this money is. And thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink. So this is for the tithe, wine or strong drink. And so when you learn about this, the Hebrew, the Jews, or Israel at the time, they weren't making alcoholic beverages and bringing them to sacrifice. And what they lust is after. So if we continue reading, whatsoever thy soul desireth, and thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thine household. So is God allowing them, after we have learned what alcohol does to the brain, your memory and reasoning, God wants your full attention. He wants you to be sober. Even back here in the Old Testament, He wants your full attention. And if we learned earlier today, what happened to Israel many, many different times is they didn't do what they were supposed to do because they didn't know what they were supposed to do. And so it wasn't because they were worshiping and getting drunk when they were worshiping God so that they could lose their judgment and lose their reasoning skills. When you worship God, He needs your full attention. He needs your full mind. Not only does He want you to be sober from alcohol, He wants you to be sober from everything else that could be distracting you when you worship Him. When we come to worship, He wants our full attention. We should give Him our full attention. That's what He deserves. And so to say that these people, that He was allowing them to come and get drunk before Him and drink wine and just have a hey-o time and worship to Him does not reasonably make sense in my mind. So that's why I've always struggled. And then when we get into sacrifices in Numbers 28, the same thing is, why do these people have strong drink? This is where I always hung up with strong drink every time. Strong drink. Why is He allowing this strong drink? And so with it, but I found something else. It's something else other than that. Fruits. All right. Social drinking, 5:18, as we already discussed. 5:18. Don't start the process of getting drunk. Don't take the steps. Don't take those steps of getting drunk. So 1 Peter 4:3, a similar thought. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, reveling, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. Excess of wine is similar to what we talk about in Ephesians 5:18. Is wine drinking. This is taking a step into drinking wine. Don't even start that process. Don't start that process to where you could get drunk. And then banqueting, also translated as drinking parties. Not necessarily excessive, but could definitely provide opportunity for excess. Don't go to these drinking parties. Don't go there. They're forbidden. Now the wedding feast. John, we're running short on time, but I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to skip through some of the verses. John 2, 1 through 10. Actually, I ramble a lot, so it'd probably be quicker if I just read it. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, They have no wine. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing the 2 of the 3 firstskins apiece. Jesus saith unto them, Fill the water pots with water, and they fill them up to the brim. And he saith unto them, Draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew. The governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. So the word well drunk. Intoxicated? How could the governor distinguish good and worse if he was intoxicated? Well drunk. So pretty much this word, what we're dealing with here, they were full. What were they full of? The good and the worse wine. New versus old, watered down versus not. All these different things are sold out. Or was it because it was the time of the year? The time of the year, it was hard to get a hold of fresh grapes, to get fresh wine. But this wine, or this juice, was fresh. It was a good stuff. So the question I want you to think about: did Christ provide alcohol to a drinking party or reveling? What happens when especially at weddings, if you look at modern societies, what happens? A lot of alcohol can turn into revelings. Did he provide a situation to where people were a lot drunk or could get drunk? Did he provide a situation for a drinking party or banqueting? Did Christ provide a large group of people with a drink that would bite, sting, or mock them? Did he do any of those things? Could he have possibly done those things? Was he a participant in those kind of things? So reasonably, what he provided was a juice. Non-alcohol. Probably fresh. Tasted really good. Not watered down. So the Last Supper. Luke 22, 7 through 10. So we all know this very, very well. And so what is he? Now this is a Passover meal. The fruit of the vine was used rather than wine. We have oinos appear so many times in the New Testament. This particular time, fruit of the vine. The other thing that we need to consider, this was a Passover meal. Passover meal was unleavened. Fermentation process from juice of wine is leavening. Yeast. It requires yeast. We discussed, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 5 earlier, a little leaven left the whole lump in regards to bread. Same thing with the drink, unleavened Passover. So considering those things, what was it? Was it leavened? It has to be no. And did Christ provide an ingredient that starts the drunken process? 1 Peter 4:3, Ephesians 5:18. Did he start that? Did he provide that? Did Christ provide the 12 with a drink that would bite, sting, or mock them? And then example of Timothy. So every time I dealt or had problems in past dealing with things like Deuteronomy 14:26 and Numbers, the strong drink question, I always went back to, well, why was Timothy only drinking water? 1 Timothy 5:23, drink no longer water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake and thine often infirmities. Remember, Paul often said in his letters, he said something like this, as I have told you before, something. So Timothy was a student of Paul. He had been taught many things by Paul face to face, not only in letter. So a lot of times in the letters we see, I've told you these things. So Timothy was drinking water only for some reason. So that was why he practiced in regards to his drink. He was only drinking water. So what did Paul instruct Timothy to drink? So one of the questions we have to do is, in this regard, is how much and for what purpose? It was just a little. And what was it for? For his stomach ailment. He had stomach ailments. That's what it was for. And so, could it have been just the juice? Could it have been a form of wine containing alcohol? And the other thing it could have been is vinegar. We know sometimes could be vinegar, although there's another word for vinegar, but it could sometimes be used vinegar. So context is anything. Timothy had already been taught several things. So what do we know about vinegar? Vinegar, people to this day, in some areas, will still use vinegar for their stomach problems. So whatever it was, whether it was vinegar or whether it was just juice or whether it was a drink containing wine, it was a little bit and it was for a medical purpose. It wasn't for him to drink with every meal. It's just a little bit for a specific medical reason. So the alcohol conclusion. Oh boy. Proper definition, translation, and context for words is crucial. Social drinking interferes with sobriety, the sobriety that God demands. Follow example of Timothy. All right, so keep those ideas in mind. But before you do that, everybody do this. Raise your arms up and cross them. I'm the lesson after lunch, and I'm already running really long. All right, drugs. Remember, clear mind. Galatians 5:19 through 21. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. Of the which I tell you before, as I have told you in the past, that we that do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. So in the minimum, remember, soberness. Remember this such like. Applies to all this stuff. Anything like drunkenness when we get into drugs. But we have this other word, witchcraft. So a lot of times when we see this word witchcraft, we think that people are doing potions and doing things and casting spells and throwing around a magic wand and flying around on broomsticks. That's a lot of times what we have in mind when we see this witchcraft word. But this witchcraft word actually comes from the word pharmakia, which is the English word pharmacy is derived from this word. So this is the actual drugs in the Bible, witchcraft. Now these people who probably would have been the people, or one of the things I read, these are your drug dealers back in the Bible times, were sorcerers and magicians. They would use these potentially to trick you into seeing things or doing things or displaying their trick, make you take this or make you take that. Because there's some things that can happen naturally that were available back then that they could take, and some of them maybe be like marijuana or mushrooms or some things like that could have been available, and I don't know what else was available. Now, many drugs destroy the body. I've been around people before and family members that have been involved with things such as methamphetamines. And methamphetamines are very quick to destroy the bodies, loads of chemicals. And one of the things about methamphetamines, when talking to family members, the first time you take it, you're automatically addicted. You're always chasing the first high. The first high is always the greatest, and they never get the same high again, but they're always chasing it. I have family members that chase this, have things, and some of them are clean. Some of them have been clean for a few years, and it is the hardest drug. Only a small percentage of people are able ever to beat it. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God? Sorry. Know ye not that you are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. All right. So I got this chart over off of this site over here on the right, and you probably can't, you may or may not be able to see. I knew it was going to be difficult. But over here on the left side is a scale, 1 through 7, on how other drugs relate to 2 drinks of beer. That's your 0.08%, which is legally drunk. I'm not sure what it is. In some states, drink. I'm not sure what it is in Oklahoma, but it's going to be somewhere around that number, what's legally drunk for driving reasons. So beer is, they got it on a scale of 2. So everything else, marijuana is your next one. It is a 3. So 1 joint of marijuana is more of an effect on your sobriety than beer. The mushrooms are a 5, just 1 mushroom. And whatever this cactus plant, I've never heard of it before. And then cocaine is a 7. And then this ecstasy over here is a 6. And this is just for their 1 normal hit of heroin or 1 pill of ecstasy. That's how it compares to beer. Now think about sobriety. Remember the sobriety thing that we're talking about. The effect of alcohol. And these are way more potent. Even the marijuana is more potent than beer in regards to how it affects the brain, how it affects the judgment on a person. Drugs conclusion. Bible does condemn drug use. Drugs can destroy the body. Drugs have a higher negative impact on sobriety than alcohol. Gambling. Introduction, and then I've got a pet peeve of the word luck that we hear a lot. Striving to get rich, authorized scriptural income, and what is wrong with gambling. Gambling, luck. We hear this word a lot. We probably use it a lot. I probably use it from time to time, although I try not to use it. And then we're going to give a few definitions. Chance, the occurrence and development of events in the absence of the obvious design. That's by Oxford Dictionary. And then luck, to prosper or succeed, especially through chance or good fortune. To come up something desirable by chance. Success or failure apparently brought by chance rather than through one's own actions. Luck promotes the absence of God. Please remove the word luck from your vocabulary. A lot of times when we say luck, we should probably say something more like, you're blessed. I ask you all to not use this word luck, and it kind of fits in with this gambling, because gambling is often a lot. People rely on chance to do these things, and the casinos are named lucky this or lucky that. So, gambling. Webster defines it as to play games of chance for money or some other stake, to take a risk in order to gain some advantage, to be wager, an act of undertaking involving risk of a loss. So, what is wrong with gambling? The better question is, what is right with gambling? Here's the introduction. 1 Timothy 6, 6 through 10. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they which be rich fall into temptations, and snare into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced himself through with many sorrows. Remember this covet word. Striving to get rich quick. Gambling's not the only thing where we strive to get rich quick, but that's the purpose. Most people do it because they want to get rich quick. They want to hit the big money. They want to hit the jackpot. They want to go home and never have to work again. Proverbs 28:20. A faithful man shall abound with blessings, but he that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. Proverbs 28:22. He that hasteth to be rich hath an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him. Proverbs 21:5. The thoughts of the diligent tend only in plenteousness, but of every one that is haste only to want. So, a lot of people says, that's my source of money. I can make money gambling. I can do things. And there are some people who are very successful gambling. Most people aren't, but there are people who are successful at it. So, let's go through, I want to quickly go through some authorized scriptural income. Work, entrance, inheritance, gift, and there's no authority for gambling. Gambling is not a job. It is not work. Matthew 28. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, call the laborers, and give them their hire, or their earnings, beginning from the last unto the first. So we can work to earn income. Some people are career gamblers. But what do we know about work, or laboring, or a job? What happens? What do we do? Usually one of two things is what happens in a job. You either produce a product to sell. Farmers produce crops. People who build cars build a car. There's something that is built. The other thing that we could do is we provide a service. A repairman comes and repairs your car, or one of those type of things. So there's either a service that's provided or a product that is bought in work. Gambling is not interest. Now there's a lot of negative in regards to interest in the Old Testament, in regards to charging interest to your brother in the Old Testament. But in this account, where the master had given three men certain monies, and he gave one 5 and he turned it into 10. He gave another 2 or 3 and he turned it into the equivalent. He doubled it. And then the last one, he got 1 and he buried it. So he said, thou askest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. So a lot of times people will say, well, I'm investing my money and it's going to return and invest it on me. But gambling is a billions of dollar industry every year, and the people who profit most are the casinos in regards to that. And very few winners, or some are very good at it. And then gambling is not inheritance. Multiple examples of inheritance in the Bible: land of Israel, Isaac, land of Israel, when they got it, and if they were dead by the time they came to the land, it was given to this kid, and how they were supposed to divide it among themselves as an inheritance. So after someone dies, it just think that was kind of the example that was laid out in the law in Israel. And then you had Isaac, Jacob, and Esau, how Jacob got the blessing or the inheritance because he tricked Esau. And then we, as Christians, are given an inheritance, and our inheritance is heaven. That's what we will inherit. But at the same time, you will leave an inheritance to your children if you have anything to leave, and so we can receive an inheritance. So when people are gambling, oftentimes kind of what's wrong with it. I'm not hurting anybody. Everybody's making their own donation, or they're giving, or they're all taking their risk. But essentially, if you gamble, you could be risking your children's inheritance, or you can be taking someone else's children's inheritance. And at the end of the day, you're not going to get an inheritance from the casino because they don't have wills. They're not going to leave it to you. Gambling is not a gift. Ephesians 4:28. Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands, the thing which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. So we can give. If we can give, someone can receive a gift. Acts 20:35 teaches that it is more blessed to give than to receive. We can give, someone can receive a gift. So we can get things from gifts. Someone loses so you can win. That's not a gift. They're not giving it to you. They're trying to win it. And the only thing that beats a casino is not you, is not me going to the casino. What beats the casino is loss of interest. Not money interest, loss of interest, people not wanting to go. So a lot of times it's not because people have lost interest in gambling. Oftentimes there's just a new casino that they'd rather go to because it's fancier or whatever. So this casino begins to fail because there's a new one that's doing something different or more attractive to them. So this one begins to lose. It's not because I won a whole bunch of money and I sank them, or you won a bunch of money, or someone. It's not the winners that kill a casino, it's another casino, or the loss of interest. And we may hear raffles and lotteries help the school. Well, the school is giving raffles, and I hate the raffles. The kids always come by and say, well, give me a raffle or what? And I say, what's it for? And they tell me what it's for, and I never do the raffle. Sometimes I may give the gift. There are some things I completely avoid, but I may give them a gift. Here's $10, but I don't want your ticket. I don't do raffles. Raffles are wrong every time. Pretty much how it goes. And the other big thing that we hear, well, the lotteries. Lotteries help the school. Lotteries are good for the schools. They help the schools. They provide income to the schools. If you are that concerned, or a gambler who participates in a lottery is that concerned for the school, just take your money and take it to the school. Give it to the school. If it's a gift for the school, take it directly to the school. Donate it to the school. The other thing that you donate to the school, you can get a tax write-off for it, so there's an advantage there. But at the same time, what's going on is nobody's giving you money. When you go to gamble, you're not gifting the school. You're trying to make yourself feel better by taking a chance. And if you win, you're taking somebody else's money. A lot of people participate in gambling and lotteries at casinos who have a hard time feeding their families. So you're taking children. You're taking food out of the mouths of other kids because their mother, their father has a problem or has a desire, is coveting something. No authority for gambling. Casting lots in the Bible, there's not wagers of money for that. They weren't wagering money. That's not gambling when they were casting lots. Although there are similar games similar to it where people are betting on casting lots, but that's not what was going on in the Bible. No example of people wagering money on games as a source of income. So what is right about gambling? What is wrong with gambling? Covetousness, stealing, false hope. What is your soul worth? Gambling, covetousness, to strongly desire something in regards to this, for this particular instance, is money without the consideration of others. Ecclesiastes 5:10, he that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. 1 Corinthians 5:11, but now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extorter, with such a one know not to eat. So if our brethren refuse to repent of gambling problem, we're not even supposed to eat with them. Proverbs 15:27, he that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house, but he that hateth gifts, or bribes, these are bribes, shall live. Greedy, covetous. Gambling, stealing, Matthew 7:12, do unto others as you would have them to unto you. Don't take other people's money for nothing. Someone loses for you to win. That's how gambling works. Galatians 6:10, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are the household of faith. How are we doing good if we're taking their money? How are we doing good for their family? How are we doing good for them individually? What kind of example are we setting for the world? If our desire is to take their money, but that's not how we look at it, because they're giving it. They're not giving it. They're trying to take your money. But they go, oh, especially when if you're at a card game, you're at a poker game at your buddy's house. I hear about this stuff all over. Let's go play cards. Like, no, y'all gamble. I'm not going to come. The whole goal is to take somebody else's money. That's the purpose. When you're in the people, well, I'm just going to go gamble, we only do a quarter or whatever, you're still taking somebody else's money. That's the goal of the game. You're not just playing cards. You want to play cards. But when you start putting money into it, now you're doing something different. Now you're gambling. It's not good for you. You're not doing them good. You're hoping that you take their money. Gambling, false hope. Colossians 3:1-3. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. When gambling, where is your hope? Is your hope on God? Or is like Chuck? Is your hope on the almighty dollar? Where's your hope? Like Chuck said, almighty dollar. Gambling. So my question is, in gambling, what is your soul worth? So if anybody paid any attention to the lottery, it got up to, I think, like 700 billion or something. And I had people at work, or a lot of times when it gets to those big numbers, there are people that go, I don't gamble, but it's worth the investment. No, I'm only putting in $10 or $20 or however much they put down. Now it's worth it. Now it's worth it to take somebody else's money. Now it's worth it. A lot of times, so what is your soul worth? I don't gamble unless it's this. At least it's this much. Unless I have this, I'm risking this little money for this much money. So where is your treasure? I'm running out of time, so I'm going to keep going. Read Luke 12:13-34. So gambling conclusion, I'm getting close to the end. Not a scriptural source of income. Not a good steward with blessings by the Lord. Not a good neighbor. And not a good place for the heart, which comes from Luke, though we just didn't read. Where's your heart? Where's your mind? What are you facing? Conclusion. Drinking alcohol is sin. Doing drugs is sin. Gambling is sin. Like we've already talked about this morning. Finding pleasure in others' sin is sin. So in regards to drinking, in regards to drugs, in regards to gambling, what do you watch? TV, internet? What do you laugh at? Things come across on your Facebook page. Are you watching that drunken idiot falling over himself and laughing about it? What are your conversations with your coworkers? Like I did. I had the conversation with my coworkers about gambling just this past week, and it fell right into place. Mine was, you're stealing from your neighbor. You're stealing from your kid. I'm pointing the point. You are hoping to take somebody else's money. The same argument. There are families out there who can't afford their next meal, but they find that money for that gambling ticket, that lottery ticket, because their hope is in that. You're taking from that family if you win. So one lady in particular is like, that's kind of what my husband says. And where do you work? You know, I know of a preacher's son who was was at the time anyway, actively a slot machine repairman. Where do you work? It goes beyond gambling, drunkenness, drugs, anything else. Beyond this, all these other lists. Where do you work? What are your conversations? What do you watch? 2 Peter 2, 18 through 19. For when they speak great swelling words of vanity, they allure through the lust of the flesh, through much wantonness, those that were clean escaped from them who live in error. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are servants of corruption. For of whom a man is overcome, of the same is he brought in bondage. So one of the things that we talked about, alcohol makes you feel good. Drugs can make you feel good. Rich, you don't have to work again. Everything's easy. Everything's free. Everything's simple. That's what's always promised. But usually, that's not what you get.